The Saturday afternoon shopping trip to Westfield Premium Mall had been planned for weeks. My stepmother Patricia, half-sisters Madison and Brianna, and I were supposed to be bonding over retail therapy and lunch. Instead, I found myself trailing behind them like a forgotten afterthought, listening to their increasingly pointed comments about my appearance, my job, and my general failure to meet their standards. "Sarah, could you at least try to walk with some confidence?" Patricia sighed as we entered Nordstrom. "You're slouching like you don't belong here." Madison, 23 and fresh out of college with her marketing degree, nodded emphatically. "Seriously, Sarah. You look like you're afraid to touch anything. It's embarrassing." 21-year-old Brianna giggled. "Maybe she should shop at Target instead. More her speed, you know." I adjusted my simple jeans and plain sweater, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm fine shopping wherever you'd like." Patricia's eyes swept over me with obvious disappointment. "That's exactly the problem, Sarah. You have no standards. No ambition. Look at your sisters." Madison landed that position at the PR firm. "Brianna's internship at the law office is going wonderfully. And you? Still working in that little office doing whatever it is you do with computers." "Data analysis," I said quietly. "Right. Data analysis." Patricia's tone made it sound like I'd said garbage collection. "At 29, Sarah, most people have figured out their lives. Your sisters are building careers, making connections, creating their futures. You're just existing." We moved through the store, Patricia and my half-sisters pulling designer items from racks, holding them up to themselves in mirrors, chatting excitedly about upcoming events and parties I wasn't invited to. I followed along, occasionally nodding when addressed, mostly ignored unless they needed someone to carry their bags. "Oh, Sarah, could you hold these?" Madison thrust 3 shopping bags at me without waiting for an answer. "We want to try on some dresses for the charity gala next month." "The one at the Ritz-Carlton?" I asked. Brianna laughed. "Not that you'd know anything about charity galas. But yes, it's a $500 plate event. Real society stuff. The kind of event where appearances matter," Patricia added pointedly. "Which is why I've been trying to help you understand how important it is to elevate yourself, Sarah. Look around." She gestured at the upscale department store, the well-dressed shoppers, the luxury brands. "This is the world your sisters move in. This is what success looks like." I nodded, shifting the shopping bags to get a better grip. "I understand. Do you, though?" Patricia's voice carried that particular edge it got when she was building up to one of her lectures. "Because sometimes I wonder if you're content being mediocre. Content being the family's. Well, I don't want to say failure, but what else would you call it?" Madison interjected, emerging from a dressing room in a stunning black cocktail dress. "I mean, look at us. Look at what we've accomplished. Then look at Sarah." The saleswoman, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation, busied herself arranging hangers. Other shoppers glanced over, some with pity, others with the kind of secondhand embarrassment that comes from witnessing someone being publicly diminished. "It's not that we don't love you," Brianna said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It's just that you're not really living up to your potential. Dad would be so disappointed if he could see how you've turned out." The mention of my father, their father, hit like it always did. He died 3 years ago, and Patricia had made it clear that his love for me had been more obligation than genuine affection. After all, I was from his first marriage, a reminder of his previous life. "Your father had such high hopes for you," Patricia continued, selecting a pair of earrings to try on. "He always said you were smart. But intelligence without ambition is worthless, isn't it? Intelligence without the drive to succeed, without the social skills to network, without the appearance to make a good impression. It's just wasted potential." We left Nordstrom and headed toward the food court, passing the Apple Store, Michael Kors, Williams-Sonoma. The mall was busy with weekend shoppers, families with children, teenagers hanging out, couples walking hand in hand. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere, to have a purpose. Everyone except me. "You know what I think your problem is, Sarah?" Madison said as we found a table in the upscale section of the food court. "You've never had to really fight for anything. You got that little computer job right out of college, you found that adequate apartment, and you just settled. You never pushed yourself to be more." "Maybe she can't be more," Brianna suggested with false sympathy. "Maybe this is just her ceiling. Not everyone is meant for success." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "That might be true. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually. Some people are simply content with mediocrity. They don't have that drive, that hunger for something better. They're happy being ordinary." "But it affects all of us," Madison complained. When people ask about Sarah, what am I supposed to say? Oh, she does something with computers and lives in a one-bedroom apartment? It's embarrassing. Especially at events like the charity gala, Brianna added. Can you imagine if we brought Sarah? In her discount store clothes, not knowing how to make conversation with successful people? She'd humiliate us. I sat there eating my salad, listening to them discuss me as if I weren't present. This wasn't new, it had been happening for years, ever since Patricia married my father when I was 15. But it had gotten worse since his death, more pointed, more cruel. The thing is, Patricia said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, I've been wondering if maybe it's time for some tough love. Your father left that trust fund for you, but maybe that's been part of the problem. Maybe knowing you have that financial cushion has made you lazy. Madison's eyes lit up with interest. What kind of tough love? Well, the trust doesn't become fully available until you're 35, right, Sarah? But your father also set it up so that if certain conditions weren't met, like achieving specific career milestones or demonstrating financial responsibility, the trustees could redirect those funds to other beneficiaries. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe you need incentive to improve yourself. Maybe you need to face the reality that your current path isn't sustainable. Your sisters have proven themselves. Madison with her career advancement, Brianna with her academic success. They're building something meaningful. Brianna leaned forward eagerly. So if Sarah doesn't get her act together, her portion could come to us? It's possible, Patricia said carefully. I'd have to discuss it with the lawyers, of course. But the trust was designed to reward success and responsibility, not enable mediocrity. The food court suddenly felt too warm, too bright, too loud. Around us, families laughed over their meals, teenagers took selfies, couples shared desserts. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that mine was being casually dismantled over Caesar salads. You can't be serious, I said quietly. Oh, I'm very serious, Patricia replied, her voice taking on that authoritative tone she used when she wanted to make sure I understood my place. Sarah, you're 29 years old. You live in a mediocre apartment, work a mediocre job, have no significant relationships, no real achievements to speak of. Your father wanted to provide for you, but he also wanted you to make something of yourself. Madison nodded vigorously. It's like that saying, give a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach him to fish and he eats for life. Maybe knowing you'll inherit money no matter what has made you lazy. But if you had to actually work for it to prove yourself worthy of it, maybe you'd finally start living up to your potential, Brianna added. I looked at their faces, Patricia's calculated coldness, Madison's eager anticipation, Brianna's barely concealed glee. They weren't trying to motivate me or help me improve. They were trying to take what my father had left me, to find a legal way to claim that I didn't deserve his love or his provision. Besides, Patricia continued, let's be honest about what's likely to happen. You're not going to suddenly transform into some high-achieving career woman. You're not going to wake up tomorrow with ambition and social skills and the drive to succeed. This is who you are, Sarah. This is your ceiling. She paused to take a sip of her sparkling water, letting her words sink in. So maybe it's better to be realistic. Maybe it's better to redirect those resources to people who will actually use them to build something meaningful. Madison wants to start her own PR firm eventually. Brianna's planning to attend law school after her undergraduate degree. They have goals, plans, futures worth investing in. Unlike me, I said flatly. Unlike you, Patricia confirmed without hesitation. And there's no shame in accepting your limitations, Sarah. Not everyone is meant for greatness. Most people live quiet, ordinary lives. Maybe that's your path and maybe that's okay. Madison leaned back in her chair looking satisfied. It would be such a relief, honestly. I hate having to explain Sarah to people. At least if she accepted her situation, we wouldn't have to keep pretending she might amount to something someday. Right. Brianna agreed. It's exhausting having to be encouraging and supportive when we all know nothing's going to change. Sarah's going to be working that same boring job, living in that same boring apartment, being the same boring person for the rest of her life. They all looked at me expectantly, waiting for my response, waiting for me to accept their assessment of my worth and my future. The mall continued its busy Saturday rhythm around us, shoppers rushing past with their purchases, children laughing, music playing from nearby stores. You might be right, I said finally. Patricia smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given me all day. I'm glad you're being realistic, Sarah. It takes maturity to accept your limitations. And honestly, Madison added, There's something admirable about knowing your place. Not everyone has to be exceptional. The world needs ordinary people too. Exactly, Brianna chimed in. You can be perfectly happy being average. There's nothing wrong with a simple life. We finished lunch in relative quiet, my half-sisters chatting about their upcoming social events, their career plans, their bright futures. Patricia occasionally threw in comments about the importance of accepting reality and making peace with one's limitations. I nodded along, made appropriate responses, played the role of the family disappointment accepting her fate. After lunch we continued shopping. Patricia wanted to find a new handbag for the charity gala. Madison needed shoes to match her dress. Brianna wanted to browse the jewelry stores. I continued to carry their bags, follow along behind them, listen to their casual cruelty disguised as concern. You know what I've been thinking, Sarah? Madison said as we entered Kate Spade. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere more affordable. That apartment you're in now, it's probably eating up most of your salary, right? Maybe somewhere further out, smaller, more budget-friendly. Good point, Patricia agreed. Living beyond your means just creates stress and unrealistic expectations. A nice, modest apartment in a less expensive area would be much more appropriate for your lifestyle. Brianna picked up a purse, examining it critically. And maybe you should think about getting a different car too. That Honda Civic is fine, but it's probably a stretch on your budget. Something used, reliable, practical. The important thing is being honest about your financial reality, Patricia added. Your father's trust fund won't be available for 6 more years, and who knows what conditions the trustees might impose. Better to live within your actual means now. I watched them shop, selecting items that cost more than I supposedly made in a week, discussing upcoming purchases that would total more than my supposed annual salary. They talked about wine tastings and weekend trips, expensive dinners and luxury spa days, private trainers and exclusive clubs. Sometimes I feel bad, Madison said as we left the store, arms full of new purchases. I mean, here we are, able to buy whatever we want, go wherever we want, do whatever we want. And Sarah has to budget for everything. Don't feel bad, Patricia advised. Everyone has different circumstances. Sarah made her choices, the career she pursued, the lifestyle she accepted, the lack of ambition she demonstrated. Actions have consequences. Besides, Brianna added cheerfully, she seems happy enough. Right, Sarah? You're content with your life. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then started ringing. Sorry, I said, pulling it out. I should take this. Sarah Chen speaking. Miss Chen, this is Michael Rodriguez from Westfield Premium Mall Management. I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday, but we have an urgent situation with the new tenant build-out in the East Wing. The contractor is asking for authorization to proceed with the electrical upgrades, and the lease agreement requires your signature before we can approve the additional costs. I glanced at Patricia and my half-sisters, who were watching me with curious expressions. How much are we talking about? I asked. The electrical upgrades will run about $47,000, and the tenant is requesting expedited completion for their Christmas season opening. The total lease modification would bring their first-year commitment to just over $2.3 million. That seems reasonable. I'll be there in about 10 minutes to review the paperwork. Thank you, Ms. Chen. I'll have everything ready in the main office. I hung up, aware that 3 pairs of eyes were staring at me. Who was that? Madison asked. Work, I said simply. Patricia frowned. What kind of data analysis requires you to work on Saturdays? And who talks about $47,000 for electrical work? Before I could answer, 2 men in mall security uniforms approached our table. Excuse me, the older one said politely. Are you Miss Sarah Chen? Yes. Ma'am, Mr. Rodriguez asked us to find you. He said you needed to get to the management office for some urgent paperwork. Something about tenant approvals. Thank you. I'll head over now. The security officers nodded respectfully and walked away. I started to stand, but Patricia grabbed my arm. Wait just a minute, she said sharply. What exactly is going on here? Why is mall management looking for you? Why are security guards treating you like you're important? I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face, then at Madison and Brianna's confused expressions. I need to go take care of some business, I said calmly. What business? Madison demanded. You said you work in data analysis. What does data analysis have to do with mall management and tenant leases and electrical upgrades? I gently removed Patricia's hand from my arm and picked up my purse. I'll explain later. This shouldn't take long. But as I started to walk away, Patricia's voice cut through the mall noise, loud enough for other shoppers to hear. Sarah Elizabeth Chin, you stop right there and explain what's happening. I turned back to face them. Patricia looked angry and confused, Madison and Brianna looked suspicious and concerned. Around us, other shoppers had slowed their pace, clearly interested in the drama unfolding. The mall management office is expecting me, I said simply. I need to go sign some paperwork. What paperwork? Brianna pressed. Why would they be looking for you specifically? This doesn't make any sense. I took a deep breath, looking at the three women who had spent the afternoon telling me how ordinary and disappointing I was, how I needed to accept my limitations and be realistic about my future. It makes perfect sense, I said quietly. I need to approve a lease modification for one of our tenants. Our tenants? Patricia's voice was sharp with confusion and growing alarm. The mall's tenants. I need to review their request for electrical upgrades and authorize the additional costs before they can proceed with their build-out for the Christmas season. Madison's mouth fell open slightly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about my job, Madison. My boring, ordinary job doing data analysis. Data analysis for property management and real estate development. Specifically for Westfield Premium Properties. The noise of the mall seemed to fade as my words sank in. Patricia's face had gone pale. Madison and Brianna were staring at me with identical expressions of dawning horror. That's impossible, Patricia whispered. Which part? That I work in property management? That I analyze data for real estate development? Or that I have the authority to approve tenant lease modifications? You said you work for a small company, Brianna protested weakly. I do work for a small company. Very small, actually. Just me. Sarah Chin Properties owns and manages 17 retail properties throughout the state, including this mall. I bought Westfield Premium 3 years ago, right after Dad died. The shopping bags Madison had been carrying slipped from her hands, luxury items scattering across the food court floor. Brianna's face had gone completely white. Patricia looked like she might be having trouble breathing. That's not possible, she repeated, her voice barely audible. It's very possible. In fact, it's reality. The trust fund Dad left me? I never needed to wait until 35 to access it. I used it as collateral to secure financing for my first property acquisition when I was 26. By the time he died, my portfolio was worth about $40 million. Today, it's worth just over $200 million. The mall security officers had returned, along with a man in a suit who was clearly management. Miss Chin, he said politely. I'm Michael Rodriguez, the property manager. I hate to interrupt your family time, but if you could spare a few minutes to review the Sephora lease modification? They're hoping to get started on the electrical work first thing Monday morning. Of course, Michael. Patricia, Madison, Brianna. This is Michael Rodriguez, who manages day-to-day operations for the mall. Michael, this is my family. Michael smiled pleasantly at them, then did a double take as he noticed the scattered shopping bags and their shocked expressions. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, I said calmly. They were just surprised to learn about my work. I don't usually discuss business during family time. Of course not. Well, the contracts are ready for your review whenever you're available. I'll be right there. Michael nodded and walked away, followed by the security officers. I turned back to face Patricia and my half-sisters, who were still frozen in place like mannequins. So, I said conversationally, about that trust fund modification you were discussing. The one where you were planning to have my inheritance redirected to Madison and Brianna for being more successful than me? Patricia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. I should probably mention that the trust fund represents less than 8% of my current net worth. Dad set it up as a safety net, but I haven't needed it. In fact, I've been adding to it over the years, planning to use it for charitable giving. Madison found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. You own this mall? I own this mall. I also own the shopping center where Brianna's law office is located, the office building where Madison's PR firm leases space, and the residential complex where Patricia's book club meets every Tuesday. Brianna's legs seemed to give out. She sat down heavily in her chair, staring at me with wide, horrified eyes. Your apartment, she whispered. You said you live in a one-bedroom apartment. I do. It's the penthouse apartment in the luxury building I developed downtown. 3,000 square feet, private elevator, rooftop garden. I like having everything on one floor. It's technically one bedroom, just happens to be larger than most houses. Patricia finally managed to speak, her voice hoarse with shock. This is impossible. You drive a Honda Civic. You dress like someone who doesn't need to impress anyone? Yes. The Honda gets good gas mileage and fits in parking spaces easily. Very practical for someone who spends a lot of time visiting various properties. And I dress comfortably because I'm usually crawling around construction sites or reviewing building plans. But you never said anything, Madison protested weakly. You never asked. You all made assumptions about my life, my success, my worth. You decided I was a disappointment and a failure without ever actually wanting to know what I do or how I'm doing. I picked up Madison's dropped shopping bags and handed them back to her. Besides, what would have been the point of telling you? So you could suddenly decide I was worth your time and attention? So you could start asking for loans or investments or favors. I've watched how you treat people you think are beneath you, Patricia. I've seen how Madison and Brianna dismiss anyone they consider unsuccessful or ordinary. Patricia was shaking now, whether from shock or anger or fear I couldn't tell. Your father, she began, but I cut her off. My father knew exactly what I was doing. He was incredibly proud of my business success. We talked every week about my properties, my plans, my achievements. He just also knew that you and the girls weren't interested in hearing about it, so he didn't force the subject. I glanced at my watch. I really do need to go review those lease documents. Sephora wants to open their holiday display early, and every day of delay costs them money. Sarah, wait, Patricia called out desperately as I started to walk away. We can talk about this. We can work this out. I turned back one more time, looking at the three women who had spent the afternoon telling me I was an embarrassment, a disappointment, a failure who needed to accept her limitations. Work what out, Patricia? The part where you were planning to steal my inheritance? The part where you've spent years telling me I'm worthless? Or the part where you just found out that the mediocre, ordinary, disappointing daughter you've been trying to get rid of actually owns the ground you're standing on? The food court had gotten quieter, other shoppers clearly listening to our conversation. Several people had their phones out, probably recording what was turning into quite the public family drama. I think we need to have a longer conversation about realistic expectations and accepting limitations, I continued. Starting with your expectation that you could manipulate legal documents to steal from me, and your need to accept the limitation that your financial security depends entirely on my goodwill. Patricia's face went from pale to gray. You see, that charitable foundation you mentioned? The one hosting the $500 plate gala at the Ritz-Carlton? I'm the primary benefactor. I've donated about $12 million to them over the past 3 years. The Ritz-Carlton? I'm a major investor in the ownership group that renovated it. Madison made a small choked sound. Your PR firm, Madison? The one in the Meridian building? I own that building. Your lease comes up for renewal next month. Brianna's law office? Also my property. Their lease expires in January. I smiled pleasantly at them. Patricia, that exclusive neighborhood where you live? I developed half of those houses, including yours. Your mortgage is actually held by one of my subsidiary companies. The silence stretched out, broken only by the ambient noise of the mall, music from stores, conversations from other shoppers, the distant sound of children playing. So when you talk about tough love and realistic expectations and accepting limitations, I said finally, maybe we should start with your realistic expectation that you'll need to find new places to live and work, and your acceptance of the limitation that your financial futures depend entirely on someone you've spent years calling a disappointment. Patricia's breathing had become shallow and rapid. Madison was crying quietly. Brianna looked like she might be sick. But don't worry, I added gently. I'm not vindictive. I'm not cruel. I won't leave you homeless or jobless or struggling. I'm just going to let you experience what it feels like when someone you depend on decides you're not worth their time and investment. I started walking toward the management office, then paused and turned back one final time. Oh, and Patricia? About that trust fund modification you wanted to discuss with the lawyers? I actually am one of the trustees. Dad made sure I had control over my own inheritance, just in case anyone ever tried to manipulate the terms. Have a good rest of your shopping trip. Try to remember that appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the most successful people are the ones who don't need to prove anything to anyone. I walked away, leaving them sitting in the food court surrounded by luxury shopping bags in the mall I owned, processing the reality that the family disappointment they'd been trying to eliminate was actually the person who controlled their entire way of life. Behind me, I could hear Patricia starting to hyperventilate, Madison sobbing, and Brianna asking desperately, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" The management office was busy with weekend activity, maintenance requests, tenant concerns, security issues. Michael Rodriguez had the Sephora lease modification ready for review, along with several other documents that needed my attention. "Sorry about the delay," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "No problem at all. Family time is important." I picked up the first contract, scanning the terms and financial implications. Outside the office window, I could see the busy mall concourse, shoppers moving purposefully between stores, families enjoying their weekend together. Somewhere out there, Patricia was probably trying to figure out how to salvage a situation that had gone from complete control to total disaster in the span of 10 minutes. Madison and Brianna were likely realizing that their financial futures had just become much more uncertain. I signed the lease modification, authorizing the electrical upgrades that would help Sephora open their holiday display on schedule. Just another Saturday afternoon business decision in the ordinary, disappointing life of someone who had finally stopped caring what other people thought she was worth. My phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia. "We need to talk. This doesn't change anything." I smiled and deleted the message without responding. "Actually, Patricia, it changed everything."